Okay, so let's look at how APIs are and what they're all about. So I'll create a new API, and that is going to be /about, and this is also a get API, as you can see by the method name. The response I'm going to send is this is me in string. So I'm going to use this response.send method, and when we go ahead and say localhost /3000, we can see the response is hello world as expected. Now if we say /about, it says this is me. So the about is the endpoint. Now the next thing we can do is we can send JSON responses. JSON is basically a JavaScript object that you can send back, and you can type in something like about website and data being this is me. We can change it to description because it makes more sense. Now you can also install Node Mon by saying npm install Node Mon, and Node Mon is basically going to restart your server every time you make a change. So for now, let's just start the server and see what the response is. So when we say localhost /3000 /about, we can see the response is as expected, but that is not a very interesting response, so we're going to open it in Postman. Now Postman is a very good friend of developers, and it basically helps you test your APIs, and you can make different types of APIs and test it with Postman. So you can download it for your system. I have already installed it, so I'm going to go ahead and open Postman. And in the meanwhile, let's see what happened to our install. The install seems to have failed, and it seems the reason was because I had the server running. So I just did -g to ensure that it's installed globally and it can be used everywhere, and I stopped the server while installing it. So these are the features that are available with Postman. You can create API documentation, you can have collections of APIs, and you can have a mock server. But for now, let's just make an API call. So here you can see we're making a get API call, and the endpoint or the URL is going to be localhost 3000 /about. When we send the request, now my server wasn't running, so I didn't get a response. But as soon as we say Node Mon index.js, which I'm going to do here, it will just start running the server. So now Node Mon is installed, so this should work. Node Mon index.js, and you can see it says watching. So when we send the request, we get a response like this. This is a JSON object, as you can see. So now let's create let's just change this for now to about and see how the response changes. You can see that the server automatically restarted. This is the advantage of using Node Mon. So it just watches for changes in your files and it automatically restarts your server. So now you can see the description is this is about, and now if we change this to a post request, we can actually send a post request as well. Now what is the difference between get and post? Post allows you to send a request body alongside with the URL. So now a request body is not going to be visible in the URL. Now if you send a request right away, you'll see that there is nothing returned because the response is actually request.body. Now if you try to add something like a text into the request body, again it doesn't send any response and it's blank. Now switching to JSON, however, now you may be expecting like, okay, so you say status okay and change all of this to string, send it as a response, and you send it as a request body and you don't get anything in response. The reason for that is because if you see if you do object.keys on the request itself, you'll see that the key that is available, it doesn't actually contain request.body. What it does contain is params in query. So if you see, there is no body available here. Now instead, if we want to check query, we can actually send query params by doing request.query. We can check what query we're sending. Now what the heck is a query? So you can just say question mark and then key equals value, and you can send that and you'll get that as a response because we are sending the request.query in the response. So now if you check on Stack Overflow, you'll quickly figure out that you need to use express.body parser in order to get the response. He's also done something interesting. So port is equal to parse_in process.environment.port comma 10. So what this is basically doing is it allows us to actually pass in a specific port number when we're starting the server, and that port number will then be used in app.listen, so that particular port number is used. Now however, if that port is not available, then we can go for 3000. I'm just going to console this here, and we'll go ahead and see the server is running. So now it says use app.configure. So I'll just grab this part of the code. All this is doing is it's configuring Express and the app, and it's basically using body parser and router. So I went ahead and saved it, and it gave me an error. The reason for this was because this is an old way of doing things, and Express has actually gotten rid of all of the internal middleware, and it has posted it on npm separately. So you can see is no longer bundled with Express and must be installed separately. So the solution for this is actually to go ahead and search for body parser, and you'll see an npm link here. When you click on npm, you'll see that it says npm install and the API itself. So you can just scroll down, and all the way down you'll see that it gives you a sample code. So what you can do is you can simply just grab this piece of code and you can paste it there. So you've got body parser.json, which you can use, and so we are going to go ahead and install this library, npm install body parser. And now what we can do is we can actually grab body parser and we can require it in our application as body parser. Now once that is done, we need to actually use body parser.json, so we can paste it there. And now if you go ahead and do node mon index.js, we'll still get an error because I made a silly mistake here. I forgot to comment the existing code, so I'll just go ahead and do that. So I was just being really silly because I forgot to comment express.body parser, which is why I was really confused. And after all of this going roundabout, I realized the mistake. So now when you start the server, you can go ahead and see that it tends to give you the same result because you're sending back request.query, but when you change it to request.body, you can see the response is status okay. I'll just go ahead and add some comments in so it's easier to understand what the different parts of the code is doing. And once it's all indented, now let's just get rid of this, and I'll give you an example of how you can use request.body. So we'll say we have a login API, for example, and we'll just go ahead and add a condition for a username, which is going to be request.body.username, and the password is going to be request.body.password. Now do note that I made a typing mistake here, but if you check if username is equal to Mubashir and password is equal to 123, then in that case we want to send a successful response. So we're just going to say status or login status is success, and similarly if that is not the case, then we are going to send a login success or login status of failure. So Node Mon is running and we can just send a request. I'll notice that it just says status okay because the endpoint was incorrect. I'll just change it to login. When we send the request, we face an error. There are two reasons for this, and I'll tell you exactly what the reasons are. So now number one, first off, I tried adding it to try catch to handle the exception, and you can see here that we didn't get a response because there was nothing in the catch block that would send a response. And I quickly realized that, and I added a response in the catch block as well. Now here you can see the reason is empty, so I just changed that to error.message, and what that helped me do is get the error in the response itself. Okay, so now I realized what the mistake was, and I went ahead and pasted the username and password. which was not actually the mistake, but it is required anyway. So let's just add it in. I'll add the username as Mubashir and I'll add the password as 123. So just make sure that both of these are in double quotes. Both the key and values are also in double quotes, and we're not going to use ampersand. Instead we're going to use a comma. Let's go ahead and send the request, and it's the same error again. So this was very confusing, but I simply made one more mistake here, which is it's supposed to be password, not pass, because I was looking for request.body password. Now the error clearly says cannot read property password of undefined, which means body was misspelled. And when I go ahead and send the request now, it is login status of success.